A single gunshot echoed across the open plains of Wyoming Territory, 1878, as Josephine Reid ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart pounding against her ribs. This wasn't how she'd imagined her journey to Cheyenne would end, ambushed by bandits with nothing but her father's old revolver and a dwindling supply of ammunition. "Hand over your valuables and we might let you live," a gruff voice called out, followed by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Josephine gripped the revolver tighter, her knuckles turning white. At 22, she was no stranger to hardship. Losing both parents to typhoid back in Philadelphia had taught her that, but nothing had prepared her for the harsh realities of the frontier. The teaching position waiting for her in Cheyenne seemed a distant dream now. "I said hand them over." The voice grew closer. Drawing a deep breath, Josephine steadied her aim around the edge of the wagon. Her finger had just brushed the trigger when the thunder of approaching horses drowned out all other sounds. Gunshots cracked through the air, but not aimed at her. "Ride on out of here if you value your lives." A new voice, deep and commanding, joined the chaos. The bandits' horses whinnied in panic as more shots were fired. Josephine risked a glance around the wagon to see 3 men on horseback driving the would-be thieves away. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered Stetson, holstered his pistol and dismounted in one fluid motion. "Madam, you can come out now. They won't be coming back." His voice was gentler now, tinged with concern. Slowly, Josephine emerged from behind the wagon, still clutching her revolver. "Thank you," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. The man approached, pushing his hat back to reveal sun-bronzed features and eyes as blue as the Wyoming sky. "Zachary O'Malley," he introduced himself with a slight nod. "These are my ranch hands, Tom and Will." "Josephine Reid," she replied, finally lowering her weapon. "I was on my way to Cheyenne when my driver—" She glanced at the still form several yards away, her voice catching. Zachary followed her gaze, his expression darkening. "I'm sorry, Miss Reid. Those men have been terrorizing travelers for weeks now." He turned to his companions. "Tom, give him a proper burial. Will, check on the horses." As his men set to work, Zachary turned back to Josephine. "What business brings you to Cheyenne, if you don't mind my asking?" "I'm to be the new schoolteacher," she explained, brushing dust from her travel-worn skirts. "The position starts in a week." Zachary nodded, a hint of respect flickering in his eyes. "Brave undertaking for a woman traveling alone." It wasn't a judgment, merely an observation. "Necessity often breeds courage, Mr. O'Malley." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That it does." "My ranch is about 3 hours' ride from here in the direction of Cheyenne. You're welcome to stay the night before continuing your journey." Josephine hesitated, weighing her limited options. The sun was already beginning its descent toward the western horizon, and the thought of spending a night alone on the plains was far from appealing. "I accept your hospitality, Mr. O'Malley, and thank you for it." Within the hour, they had transferred Josephine's belongings to Zachary's wagon and were heading eastward across the rolling grasslands. As they traveled, Zachary pointed out landmarks, a distinctive outcropping of rocks, the winding path of a creek that ran strong even in summer. "How long have you been in Wyoming Territory, Mr. O'Malley?" Josephine asked as the wagon bumped along the rutted trail. "Going on 15 years now. Came out after the war with nothing but determination and a few head of cattle." There was no boasting in his tone, just simple fact. "And you?" "Where do you call home?" "Philadelphia, originally. Though I suppose Cheyenne will be home now." Zachary nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Territory's changing fast, railroads bringing more folks every day, some for the better, some." He trailed off. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the landscape, a ranch house came into view, nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance. It wasn't grand, but it was substantial, a 2-story main house with several outbuildings and corrals spread across the property. Cattle dotted the surrounding pastureland. "Welcome to Silvercreek Ranch," Zachary said as they approached. As the wagon rolled into the yard, a young girl of about 12 burst from the front door, her dark braids bouncing against her shoulders. "Pa, you're back early." Her smile faltered slightly upon seeing Josephine. Lizzie, this is Miss Reid, Zachary explained as he brought the wagon to a stop. She was set upon by Harker's gang on her way to Cheyenne. She'll be staying with us tonight. The girl's curiosity visibly outweighed her initial hesitation. Are you really from back east? Your dress looks fancy even with all the dust. Elizabeth, Zachary admonished gently, but Josephine laughed. Yes, I am from Philadelphia, and this dress was indeed quite fine before my journey west decided to test its durability. Lizzie grinned, revealing a missing tooth. Pa says the West tests everything, especially people. Your father seems like a wise man. Zachary cleared his throat, appearing almost embarrassed by the praise. Lizzie, show Miss Reid to the guest room while I see to the horses, and tell Mrs. Winters will have one more for supper. Yes, Pa. Lizzie bounded forward to take one of Josephine's smaller bags. This way, Miss Reid. Mrs. Winters is our housekeeper. She makes the best biscuits in the whole territory. Josephine followed the energetic child into the house, struck by the unexpected comfort of its interior. Though rustic, the main room boasted sturdy furniture, a stone fireplace, and shelves lined with books more than she would have expected in a frontier ranch home. Pa reads every night, Lizzie explained, noticing Josephine's interest in the library. Says a man's mind needs exercise same as his body. The guest room, though small, was clean and welcoming, with a handmade quilt covering the bed and fresh wildflowers in a jar on the dresser. Did you pick these? Josephine asked, touching a vibrant purple bloom. Lizzie nodded. I gather flowers every few days. Pa says they brighten the place up. She hesitated before adding more softly, Ma used to have flowers all over the house. Used to. She died when I was 5, pneumonia. Lizzie stated this matter-of-factly, though her eyes dimmed slightly. Pa says I'm just like her, can't sit still and love pretty things that don't serve any purpose. Josephine's heart clenched. I'm sorry about your mother, Lizzie. I lost my parents recently as well. The girl's eyes widened with shared understanding. It's hard, isn't it? Even when you try to be brave. Especially then, Josephine agreed, surprised by the child's insight. A comfortable silence settled between them until it was broken by the arrival of Mrs. Winters, a round-faced woman with iron-gray hair who brought warm water for washing and news that supper would be ready shortly. By the time Josephine had refreshed herself and changed into her least wrinkled dress, the aroma of roasted meat and baking bread filled the house. She descended to find Zachary freshly washed as well, his damp hair combed back and his work clothes exchanged for a clean shirt and trousers. Supper proved to be a lively affair. Lizzie dominated the conversation, peppering Josephine with questions about city life and what it was like to be a teacher. Zachary intervened occasionally, reminding his daughter to let their guest eat, but his indulgent smile betrayed his pride in her curiosity. As the meal concluded, Lizzie leaned forward eagerly. Will you read to us, Miss Reid? Pa usually reads after supper, but I bet you know different stories. Elizabeth, Miss Reid is tired from her journey, Zachary began, but Josephine shook her head. I'd be delighted to read. It's the least I can do to repay your hospitality. So, as the evening shadows lengthened, Josephine found herself by the fireplace, reading from a volume of Dickens while Lizzie sat enraptured at her feet, and Zachary occupied an armchair opposite, his expression thoughtful as he watched the two of them. When Lizzie had been sent to bed despite her protests, Zachary and Josephine lingered by the fire, a comfortable silence between them until he finally spoke. You have a gift with children. The school in Cheyenne is fortunate to have found you. Thank you, I've always loved teaching. She hesitated, then added, your daughter is a remarkable girl. You've raised her well, especially under difficult circumstances. Zachary stared into the flames. I do my best, but a girl needs a mother. There are things I can't teach her, conversations I don't know how to have. He shook his head. Listen to me, you've barely escaped danger, and here I am burdening you with my troubles. Not at all, it's actually comforting hearing about normal concerns after today's events. Their eyes met across the fireplace, an unexpected connection forming in the quiet moment. Then Zachary stood, breaking the spell. You should rest. We'll leave for Cheyenne after breakfast. Josephine nodded, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. Good night, Mr. O'Malley, and thank you again. Zachary, he corrected. Out here, formality seems an unnecessary luxury. Then good night, Zachary, she said, a small smile playing at her lips. And I'm Josephine. The morning dawned clear and cool, with Lizzie already helping Mrs. Winters prepare breakfast by the time Josephine came downstairs. The girls' enthusiasm hadn't diminished overnight, and she chatted constantly as they ate, asking Josephine if she would visit again and promising to show her the new foal in the spring. Lizzie, Zachary finally interrupted, Miss Reid has a position waiting in Cheyenne. She'll be busy with her students. But Cheyenne's not so far, Lizzie argued, and you go there for supplies all the time. We'll see, was all Zachary would commit to, though his eyes met Josephine's briefly over his coffee cup. The journey to Cheyenne took most of the morning, with Zachary pointing out features of the landscape and sharing stories of the area's history. As they approached the growing town, with its mix of wooden buildings and more ambitious brick structures, Josephine felt both anticipation and a strange reluctance. The schoolhouse is on the north side, she told him, consulting the letter of employment she'd carried all the way from Philadelphia. Zachary nodded, guiding the wagon through streets busy with horses, wagons, and pedestrians. Cheyenne was still rough around the edges, but its aspirations to civilization were evident in the presence of churches, a hotel that advertised Eastern comforts, and storefronts displaying goods that might have been found in any Eastern city. The schoolhouse turned out to be a modest but well-maintained wooden building with a small bell tower. Next to it stood a compact house that Josephine assumed would be her residence. As Zachary helped unload her belongings, a middle-aged man in a black coat approached them. Miss Reid, I presume. Wallace Thornton, head of the school board. He extended a hand which Josephine shook. We were beginning to worry when you didn't arrive yesterday. Miss Reid encountered some trouble on the road, Zachary explained, his tone making it clear he wouldn't elaborate. Thornton's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied Zachary. Mr. O'Malley, didn't expect to see you in town until the cattle auction next month. Change of plans, Zachary replied evenly. An undercurrent of tension hung between the men, and Josephine found herself wondering about its source. Well, Thornton continued, turning his attention back to Josephine, the school term begins Monday. The previous teacher left detailed notes on each student's progress. We expect you to maintain the high standards our community has established. Of course, Josephine assured him, though she was already forming impressions about Mr. Thornton's standards. After the school board representative departed, promising to return with keys to both buildings, Zachary helped carry the last of Josephine's trunks onto the small porch of the teacher's cottage. Thornton's not a bad sort, just rigid, he told her. His son's one of the most promising students in the school, puts a lot of pressure on the boy. I'll keep that in mind. Josephine hesitated, suddenly aware that their time together was ending. I don't know how to thank you properly for all you've done. Zachary shook his head. No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same. We both know that's not true. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Perhaps not. He shifted his weight, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. Lizzie would be disappointed if I didn't extend an invitation. Once you're settled, you'd be welcome at Silvercreek anytime. Warmth spread through Josephine's chest. I'd like that very much. Good, he nodded, settling his hat more firmly on his head. Well, Miss Reid, Josephine, welcome to Wyoming. As she watched him drive away, Josephine couldn't help but feel that her new life in the West had already taken an unexpected turn. The first weeks in Cheyenne passed in a whirlwind of activity. Josephine found herself responsible for 28 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age, each with their own personalities and challenges. Young Timothy Thornton, as Zachary had suggested, was indeed bright but burdened by his father's expectations. There were also the Wilson twins, who finished each other's sentences, Mary Parker, whose essays showed remarkable insight, and Jeremiah Cooper, whose difficulty with reading was matched only by his determination to overcome it. The townspeople themselves presented another kind of education. There were the established families like the Thorntons, who had come with the railroad and considered themselves the arbiters of local society. Then there were the shopkeepers, ranchers, and laborers who formed the backbone of the community. And finally, there were those who existed on the margins, the saloon girls, the drifters, and the handful of Chinese workers who kept to themselves. Josephine was invited to Sunday dinners, church socials, and afternoon teas, each occasion an opportunity for the townsfolk to assess their new teacher. She navigated these events carefully, mindful that her position required both respect and a certain distance. Throughout those busy weeks, her thoughts often drifted to Silvercreek Ranch. Lizzie had sent a letter, delivered by one of the ranch hands who came to town for supplies, describing in detail the progress of various animals and her own lessons with Mrs. Winters, who apparently taught her reading and arithmetic when not managing the household. Zachary hadn't added any message of his own, but Josephine found herself hoping each time the door of the schoolhouse opened that she might see his tall figure. It was a foolish notion, she told herself. Their paths had crossed briefly, that was all. Then 6 weeks after her arrival in Cheyenne, Josephine returned to her cottage after school to find Zachary O'Malley waiting on her porch, hat in hand. "Mr. O'Malley," she greeted him, unable to suppress her smile, "this is a surprise." "Zachary," he reminded her. "I was in town for business and thought I'd check if you were settling in well." "I am, thank you. Would you like to come in for tea?" The invitation slipped out before she could consider the propriety, but the warmth in his eyes told her he didn't mind. The cottage was small, a sitting room, bedroom, and kitchen, but Josephine had made it her own with books, a few cherished mementos from home, and wildflowers arranged in mason jars. Lizzie would approve of the flowers, Zachary noted as he took a seat at her kitchen table. Her letter mentioned she's been learning about different varieties. She sounds like a natural botanist. Catherine, her mother, was the same way, could name every wildflower in the territory. A shadow crossed his face. 7 years since she's been gone, and there are still moments I turn to tell her something before remembering she's not there. Josephine set the kettle on the stove. "My mother used to say that grief is just love with nowhere to go. Wise woman, your mother, she was." Josephine busied herself with cups and saucers. "Now, tell me what really brings you to town, surely not just to check on a schoolteacher you barely know." Zachary's lips quirked upward. "Caught me. There's to be a harvest dance at the Grange Hall this Saturday. Lizzie insisted I invite you properly in person." "Did she now?" Josephine couldn't help the warmth spreading through her chest. She can be persuasive when she sets her mind to something. He paused, then added more quietly, "Though in this case her wishes aligned with my own." The kettle whistled, giving Josephine a moment to compose herself. "I would be delighted to attend," she said, pouring the hot water into the teapot. "Though I should warn you, my dancing skills are confined to formal Eastern ballrooms. I suspect a Western harvest dance might be quite different." "Don't worry, I'm an excellent teacher." The teasing light in his blue eyes made her pulse quicken. They talked until the shadows lengthened, Josephine sharing stories of her students and Zachary updating her on Lizzie's latest adventures. When he finally rose to leave, promising to collect her at 6 on Saturday, Josephine felt as though she'd known him for years rather than weeks. That night, as she prepared for bed, Josephine found herself humming a tune her father used to play on the piano. It had been months since music had come so naturally to her, and she recognized it for what it was: happiness, or at least its beginning. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp air, golden sunlight, and a sky so blue it rivaled Zachary's eyes. Josephine spent more time than usual on her appearance, finally settling on a dress of deep copper that complemented her auburn hair. It wasn't the most fashionable gown by Eastern standards, but its simple elegance suited both the occasion and her new home. Precisely at 6, a knock sounded at her door. Zachary stood on the porch, freshly shaven and dressed in clean dark trousers, a white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. Beside him, practically bouncing with excitement, was Lizzie, looking years older in a pale blue dress with her hair arranged in a more grown-up style. "Miss Reid, you look beautiful." the girl exclaimed. Doesn't she, Pa? Zachary's gaze moved appreciatively over Josephine. She certainly does. And you both look quite handsome, Josephine replied, addressing Lizzie to hide the blush rising to her cheeks. That dress brings out your eyes. Mrs. Winters altered one of Ma's old dresses for me, Lizzie explained, twirling to show it off. Said it was about time I started looking like a young lady instead of a ranch hand. The Grange Hall was already bustling when they arrived, decorated with autumn leaves, corn husks, and paper lanterns. A four-piece band played lively tunes as couples twirled across the wooden floor. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and the air was rich with the scents of roasted meats, pies, and spiced cider. Josephine had barely removed her shawl before Timothy Thornton's mother approached, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Miss Reid, how lovely to see you outside the classroom. And with Mr. O'Malley, no less. Her gaze slid to Zachary, assessing. I wasn't aware you two were acquainted. Mr. O'Malley was kind enough to assist me when I first arrived in the territory, Josephine explained, maintaining a polite tone despite Mrs. Thornton's obvious prying. How fortunate for you, the woman replied, her emphasis suggesting she found the connection anything but fortunate. Well, enjoy the evening. The school board will be interested to see our new teacher participating in community events. As Mrs. Thornton moved away, Zachary leaned close to Josephine's ear. Don't mind her. Sarah Thornton considers herself the guardian of Cheyenne's social order. She's not the first society matron I've encountered, Josephine assured him. Philadelphia had them in abundance. Lizzie, who had been watching the exchange with undisguised curiosity, tugged at Josephine's sleeve. Come meet my friends, Miss Reid. They don't believe I know the teacher. The evening unfolded in a kaleidoscope of introductions, conversations, and dancing. Zachary proved to be an excellent partner, guiding Josephine through unfamiliar steps with a steady hand and patient instruction. When they paused for refreshments, she found herself surrounded by her students, eager to show their parents that they were on familiar terms with Miss Reid. It was during one such conversation that Josephine became aware of Wallace Thornton watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable. When their eyes met, he offered a curt nod before turning to speak with another member of the school board. Ignore him, Zachary murmured, appearing at her side with 2 cups of cider. Thornton's had his eye on the mayor's office for years. He considers everything and everyone in terms of how they might advance or hinder his ambitions. And which category do I fall into? Josephine asked, accepting the cider. That depends on who you're seen with, Zachary replied, a sardonic edge to his smile. Being associated with me won't do you any favors in Thornton's eyes. Before Josephine could ask what he meant, Lizzie bounded up to them, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Pa, they're playing the Virginia reel. You promised to dance with me, so I did. Zachary handed his cider to Josephine with an apologetic smile. Duty calls. As father and daughter joined the forming lines, Josephine found an empty chair along the wall to watch. Zachary moved with surprising grace for such a powerfully built man, and Lizzie mirrored his movements with the natural coordination of youth. The sight of them laughing together as they navigated the lively dance warmed Josephine's heart. They make quite the pair, don't they? The voice belonged to an elderly woman who had taken the seat beside Josephine. Yes, they do, Josephine agreed. I'm Martha Simmons. My husband and I have the Mercantile on Main Street. She offered a gnarled hand which Josephine shook. I knew Catherine, Zachary's wife. She was a lovely soul taken far too soon. I've heard she was wonderful with plants and flowers, Josephine said, recalling Zachary's comments. Martha nodded. Had the most beautiful garden in the territory, despite our harsh climate. Zachary built it for her as a wedding present, raised beds, a little greenhouse for the winter, said he couldn't give her the luxuries of the East, but he could give her that. Her eyes grew distant with memory. After she died, he couldn't bear to look at it, let it all go to ruin. How sad, Josephine murmured, her eyes finding Zachary among the dancers. It was Lizzie who finally brought him around, must have been about 7 when she decided to try reviving some of her mother's plants. Nearly broke Zachary's heart all over again, but he couldn't deny the child. Martha patted Josephine's hand. That garden's coming back now, bit by bit, like Zachary himself. Before Josephine could respond, the dance concluded and Zachary was making his way back to them, Lizzie in tow. Mrs. Simmons, he greeted the older woman warmly. Telling tales about me, only the good ones, Zachary, she replied with a wink at Josephine. Though those are fewer and further between, he laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I won't deny it. Turning to Josephine, he extended his hand. They're playing a waltz next. May I have this dance? As they moved onto the floor, Zachary's arms circling her waist with just the right pressure, Josephine found herself wondering about the tension between him and the Thorntons, about the garden Martha had mentioned, and about the man himself, the layers beneath the capable rancher she'd first encountered. You're thinking awfully hard for someone who's supposed to be enjoying a dance, Zachary observed, guiding her through a turn. I was just wondering about something Mrs. Simmons mentioned, a garden you built for your wife. A shadow crossed his face, but he didn't look away. Catherine loved growing things, said it gave her hope to see life pushing up through the soil each spring. I'd like to see it someday, Josephine said softly. It's not much to look at now, but Lizzie's been working on it, says she wants to make her mother proud. His voice roughened. She'd have liked you, Catherine would. She always said education was the greatest gift we could give Lizzie. The simple sincerity of his words touched Josephine deeply. I'm sure I would have liked her too. The music swelled around them as they continued to waltz, moving together as if they'd danced 100 times before. For those few minutes, the crowded hall seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a world of their own making. When the music finally ended, Zachary kept hold of her hand a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, Josephine. She wasn't sure if he was thanking her for the dance or for listening about Catherine, but it didn't really matter. You're welcome, Zachary. The remainder of the evening passed quickly. Lizzie convinced Josephine to join a group dance, which resulted in much laughter as she attempted to master the unfamiliar steps. Several of her students' parents invited her to Sunday dinner, and Mrs. Simmons insisted she visit the Mercantile for tea the following week. By the time they left the Grange Hall, the moon was high and Lizzie was yawning despite her protests that she wasn't tired at all. It's nearly midnight, young lady, Zachary informed her as he helped Josephine into the buggy. Well past your bedtime. But we're staying in town tonight, aren't we, Pa? Lizzie asked, climbing in beside Josephine. At the hotel, you said we wouldn't head back to the ranch until morning. That's the plan, he confirmed, taking his seat and gathering the reins. Josephine felt a flutter of disappointment at the reminder that they wouldn't be returning to her cottage. Of course, that would have been highly improper, but part of her had hoped for a few more minutes alone with Zachary. As if reading her thoughts, he guided the buggy not toward the hotel but through the quieter streets of Cheyenne, taking a route that would eventually lead to her home, but in no particular hurry to get there. Did you enjoy the dance, Miss Reid? Lizzie asked, leaning against Josephine's shoulder. Very much. It was quite different from the formal affairs I attended in Philadelphia. Better or worse, Josephine smiled at the girl's directness. Different, but in a good way, more genuine, I think. Pa says Eastern folks put too much stock in appearances, Lizzie remarked, then quickly added, not that you do, of course. Zachary cleared his throat. I believe what I said was that some Eastern folks value the wrong things, but there are good people everywhere. That's very diplomatic of you, Josephine teased, his lips quirked upward. I have my moments. All too soon they arrived at Josephine's cottage. Zachary helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist just a fraction longer than necessary. Thank you for a wonderful evening, she said, suddenly shy. The pleasure was ours, he replied. Isn't that right, Lizzie? But Lizzie had dozed off, her head nestled against the side of the buggy. Zachary chuckled softly. So much for her claims of not being tired. They stood in the moonlight, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Josephine stepped back slightly. You mentioned once that you might like to visit Silvercreek again. The invitation stands, anytime. I have a school holiday coming up in 2 weeks, Josephine offered. Perhaps then, if it's convenient, we'll look forward to it. His voice was warm with promise. As the buggy pulled away, Lizzie rousing just enough to wave sleepily, Josephine felt a certainty settling in her heart. This was only the beginning of something important, something that might just change her life completely. The intervening weeks passed both quickly and agonizingly slowly. Josephine threw herself into her teaching, introducing new books to her older students and developing creative ways to engage the younger ones. She took tea with Mrs. Simmons, who regaled her with tales of Cheyenne's early days and offered insights into the town's various personalities. She even accepted dinner invitations from several families, including, somewhat reluctantly, the Thorntons. That particular evening proved as uncomfortable as she'd anticipated. Wallace Thornton questioned her teaching methods and made thinly veiled comments about Eastern ideas that had no place in Wyoming Territory. His wife inquired about Josephine's friendship with Zachary O'Malley in a tone that suggested it was a topic of local gossip. Only young Timothy seemed genuinely pleased by her presence, showing her his collection of books and asking earnest questions about life in Philadelphia. As Josephine prepared for her visit to Silvercreek, selecting a practical riding outfit and packing a few small gifts for Lizzie and Mrs. Winters, she found herself both excited and nervous. The connection she felt with Zachary seemed to deepen each time they met, yet she wondered if she was being foolish. She had come to Wyoming to build a new life, not to lose her heart to a widowed rancher, no matter how compelling he might be. Zachary arrived early Saturday morning, his eyes lighting up when he saw her waiting on the porch with her small valise. "Ready for your taste of ranch life?" he asked as he helped her into the buggy. "More than ready," she assured him. "I've been looking forward to it all week." The journey to Silvercreek was filled with comfortable conversation. Zachary told her about his plans for expanding the ranch, while Josephine shared stories about her students' progress. Neither mentioned the growing tension between Thornton and the ranchers over water rights, though Josephine had heard enough in town to know it was becoming a serious issue. As they approached the ranch, Josephine was struck anew by the beauty of the setting, the graceful rise of the mountains, the meandering creek that gave the property its name, the sturdy buildings that spoke of hard work and permanence. Lizzie spotted them from the corral where she was brushing a dappled gray pony. Dropping the brush, she raced across the yard, hair flying behind her. "Miss Reid, you came." "I promised I would," Josephine laughed, accepting the girl's enthusiastic hug as she stepped down from the buggy. "I have so much to show you. The garden, my pony Daisy, the new calves, and the quilt I'm learning to make with Mrs. Winters." "Breathe, Lizzie," Zachary interrupted with an indulgent smile. "Miss Reid has all weekend. There's no need to fit everything into the first 5 minutes." Mrs. Winters emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Welcome back, Miss Reid. I hope your hungry dinner will be ready within the hour." The afternoon passed in a whirlwind of activity as Lizzie proudly showed Josephine around the ranch. The girl's excitement was infectious, her commentary a mixture of practical knowledge and imaginative observations. She saved the garden for last, leading Josephine to a sheltered area behind the house where raised beds and a small greenhouse created an unexpected haven. "Ma started it," Lizzie explained, her voice softening. "Pa says she could make anything grow, even here where the winters are so hard." The garden, though still showing signs of years of neglect, was coming back to life. Late-season flowers added splashes of color among the vegetables and herbs, and young fruit trees stood in neat rows, their leaves beginning to turn with the approach of autumn. "I've been using Ma's old journals," Lizzie continued, pointing to a weathered book lying on a small workbench. She wrote down everything: when to plant, how to protect things from frost, which flowers grow best together. "It's wonderful that you have her words to guide you," Josephine said, touched by the girl's dedication. Lizzie nodded solemnly. "Pa couldn't look at the garden for a long time after she died, said it hurt too much. But last year I asked if I could try growing some flowers and he helped me clear one of the beds." Her face brightened. "Now he helps me all the time, says it makes him feel close to Ma." "Your mother would be very proud of what you're doing here," Josephine told her, earning a smile that illuminated the girl's entire face. That's what Pa says too. They returned to the house to find Zachary and Mrs. Winters setting the table for dinner. The meal was simple but delicious roast chicken, fresh vegetables from the garden, and Mrs. Winters' famous biscuits, which lived up to their reputation. After dinner, while Mrs. Winters and Lizzie cleared the dishes, Zachary invited Josephine to join him on the porch. The evening was mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine from the distant mountains. "Lizzie's been counting the days until your visit," he told her as they settled into the porch chairs. "I've never seen her take to someone so quickly." "The feeling is mutual," Josephine assured him. "She's an extraordinary child, she is that," pride colored his voice. "Though I can't take much credit, she was born with that spirit. You're too modest. Children don't raise themselves, Zachary." He looked out across the ranch, his expression contemplative. "I've made plenty of mistakes. After Catherine died, I was lost. Focused on the ranch, on survival, but not always on what Lizzie needed most. Yet here she is, bright, confident, kind. You must have done something right." His gaze returned to her, unexpectedly intense. "You have a gift, Josephine, for teaching, you mean. For seeing the best in people, for making them want to live up to that vision." The sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. "I just see what's there. Maybe." His hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the arm of her chair. "Or maybe you see what could be." The warmth of his touch sent a current through her that had nothing to do with the mild evening. For a long moment they sat in silence, the connection between them deepening with each shared breath. Then Lizzie burst onto the porch, carrying a lantern. "Can we show Miss Reid the stars, Pa?" "They're so bright tonight," the moment broke, but the feeling lingered as they followed Lizzie into the yard. Zachary spread a blanket on the grass, and the three of them lay back to gaze at the vast Wyoming sky, Lizzie between them pointing out constellations her father had taught her. Later, as Josephine prepared for bed in the guest room, she found herself humming again the same tune from weeks before. But this time, she recognized it wasn't just happiness she was feeling. It was something deeper, more profound, something that felt remarkably like coming home. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. Josephine woke to the scent of coffee and the distant sounds of ranch life, horses nickering, cattle lowing, men calling to one another as they went about their work. For a moment, she lay still, absorbing the peaceful atmosphere that was so different from the bustle of Cheyenne or the confines of Philadelphia. After dressing in the riding clothes she'd brought, she made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Winters preparing a hearty breakfast and Lizzie setting the table. "Pa's checking on a new calf," the girl explained, "but he said to tell you he'll be back soon to take you riding if you're interested." "I'd like that very much," Josephine replied, accepting the cup of coffee Mrs. Winters offered. "Miss Reid, can I ask you something?" Lizzie's tone was suddenly serious, of course. "Do you like it here? At Silvercreek, I mean." Josephine considered the question thoughtfully. "Very much. It's beautiful, peaceful, and the company is excellent," Lizzie beamed. "I was hoping you'd say that." "Because Pa seems happier when you're here. He smiles more." Before Josephine could formulate a response, the back door opened and Zachary stepped in, removing his hat as he entered. His eyes found Josephine immediately, a smile spreading across his face that confirmed Lizzie's observation. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Sleep well." "Wonderfully," she assured him. "Lizzie tells me you're offering riding lessons today, if you're game. Thought I'd show you some of the property that you can't see from the buggy." He accepted a cup of coffee from Mrs. Winters. "Nothing too challenging. I've got a gentle mare that would suit you." After breakfast, they made their way to the stables where Zachary introduced Josephine to Willow, a dun mare with soft eyes and a calm temperament. He helped her mount, his hands steady at her waist, then swung up onto his own horse, a powerful bay stallion. Lizzie joined them on her gray pony, taking the lead as they rode out across the pastures. The morning was perfect for riding, cool enough to be comfortable, but with sunshine that warmed their shoulders and glinted off the creek as they followed its winding path. Zachary was an attentive teacher, offering quiet guidance as Josephine grew accustomed to Willow's gait. By the time they reached a ridge overlooking the valley, She was feeling confident enough to truly enjoy the experience. They dismounted to rest the horses, Lizzie immediately wandering off to gather late wildflowers while Zachary and Josephine stood side by side, taking in the panoramic view of Silvercreek spread out below them. "It's breathtaking," Josephine murmured. "This was the spot," Zachary said softly. "When I first came to this territory, I stood right here and knew this was where I wanted to build a life. I can see why." She turned to him, struck by the play of sunlight across his features. "You've built something remarkable here, Zachary." "It's a good life," he agreed. "Hard sometimes, but good." His eyes held hers. "Better lately." The implication was clear, and Josephine felt her heartbeat quicken. Miss Reid, look what I found," Lizzie called, running toward them with a handful of vibrant purple flowers. "These are Ma's favorites, one of her favorites. She loved all flowers, really." Josephine accepted the impromptu bouquet with genuine appreciation. "They're beautiful, Lizzie, thank you." "They're called prairie gentian," the girl explained. "Ma's journal says they bloom late, just when you think summer's over. She said they're like hope that comes when you least expect it." Zachary's expression softened as he looked at the flowers in Josephine's hands. She was right about that. The moment was interrupted by distant thunder. Looking up, they saw dark clouds gathering over the mountains. "Storm's coming," Zachary observed. "We should head back." They mounted quickly and set a faster pace, returning to the ranch. The first fat raindrops began to fall just as they reached the stables, and by the time they had unsaddled the horses and made a dash for the house, the rain was coming down in sheets. Lunch was a cozy affair with the rain drumming on the roof and occasional flashes of lightning illuminating the windows. Afterward, when Lizzie went upstairs to work on her lessons with Mrs. Winters, Zachary invited Josephine to join him in the study. It was a comfortable room, lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk covered with papers and leather-bound ledgers. A fire burned in the grate, taking the chill from the rain-cooled air. "I need to catch up on some ranch accounts," Zachary explained, "but I thought you might enjoy browsing the library. Catherine was an avid reader, and I've tried to keep adding to the collection." "It's impressive," Josephine said, running her fingers along the spines of books ranging from practical guides to agriculture to novels by Dickens and Eliot. "Help yourself to anything that interests you." For the next hour, they shared a companionable silence, Zachary working at his desk while Josephine curled in an armchair with a volume of poetry. Occasionally, she would glance up to find him watching her, a warmth in his eyes that made her heart flutter. The storm intensified, rattling the windows and sending the occasional gust of wind down the chimney to disturb the fire. When a particularly violent crack of thunder shook the house, Zachary looked up with a frown. "This is developing into quite the tempest." "I'm afraid the road to Cheyenne will be washed out by morning." Josephine set down her book. "You think we won't be able to return tomorrow? It's a distinct possibility." He hesitated. "I know you have school, but it might be safer to delay our departure until the roads are passable." "My students' safety comes first. If the roads are dangerous, they shouldn't be traveling either." She tried to quell the flutter of excitement at the thought of an extended stay. "Perhaps I should write a note to be delivered to town if possible," Zachary nodded. "I'll send one of the hands as soon as there's a break in the weather." As if in direct response to his words, a blinding flash of lightning was followed immediately by a deafening clap of thunder. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged the room into darkness. "Well, that settles it," Zachary's voice came from the gloom. "No one's going anywhere tonight." By the light of the fire, she could see him moving to the mantel where he lit an oil lamp. The warm glow spread through the room, casting long shadows and highlighting the strong planes of his face. "Are you all right?" he asked, bringing the lamp closer. "Fine," she assured him. "Just startled." Before he could respond, the study door burst open and Lizzie rushed in, wide-eyed but trying to appear brave. "That was a big one." "It certainly was," Zachary agreed, putting an arm around his daughter's shoulders. "But we're all safe inside." Mrs. Winters appeared in the doorway, additional lamps in hand. "I've checked all the windows upstairs. No leaks yet, but that west-facing bedroom has a draft something fierce." "The guest room?" Zachary asked with a frown. "I'm afraid so. The wind's coming right off the mountains and finding every crack in those old window frames." Mrs. Winters gave Josephine an apologetic look. "You'd freeze in there tonight, miss, with no fire." "She can stay in my room," Lizzie offered immediately. "I have a big bed and I don't mind sharing." "That's very generous of you, Lizzie," Josephine said, touched by the girl's concern. "It's settled then," Zachary decided. "Mrs. Winters, would you help Miss Reid move her things? And perhaps we could all use some hot chocolate to ward off the chill." Later, after a simple supper eaten by lamplight and several rounds of checkers with Lizzie, Josephine found herself sitting beside the fire in the main room while Zachary stoked the flames. The storm continued to rage outside, but there was a coziness to the scene that made the wild weather seem distant and unimportant. "Thank you for your hospitality," Josephine said as he straightened. "You and Lizzie have made what could have been an inconvenient situation into something quite wonderful." Zachary took the seat opposite her, the firelight playing across his features. "Having you here feels right, Josephine, natural as if—" He paused, searching for words. "As if what?" "As if this is where you belong." The simple statement, delivered with such quiet certainty, took her breath away. "Zachary," he leaned forward, his expression earnest, "I know it's soon, we've only known each other a short while. But I can't remember feeling this way before, not even with Catherine, and I loved her dearly." "I feel it too," Josephine admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "This connection between us, it's unlike anything I've experienced." "I'm not a man given to flights of fancy," Zachary continued, his gaze steady. "When I commit to something, it's with my whole heart, so I need you to know that what I'm feeling for you is real and lasting." "I believe you," she said simply. "I feel the same certainty." He reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, a working man's hand, but his touch was gentle as his thumb traced patterns across her skin. "I don't want to rush you," he said. "You've built a life in Cheyenne, a career you care about. I would never ask you to give that up." "What are you asking?" His blue eyes held hers, unwavering. "For now, just the chance to court you properly, to see where this leads us." Joy blossomed in Josephine's chest, bright and warm. "I'd like that very much." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, then brilliant. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned across the space between them. When his lips met hers, the kiss was tender, a promise rather than a demand. Josephine responded in kind, her free hand coming up to rest against his cheek. When they finally parted, Zachary pressed his forehead to hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. "I've been wanting to do that since the harvest dance," he confessed. "I've been hoping you would," she replied, a smile in her voice. They might have stayed that way longer, but a creak on the stairs alerted them to Lizzie's presence. They moved apart, though Zachary kept hold of Josephine's hand. "Is everything all right, sweetheart?" he asked his daughter. Lizzie stood on the bottom step, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "Just came to say good night and to see if Miss Reid was ready to come up too." "I believe I am," Josephine said, rising from her chair. "It's been quite the eventful day." Zachary stood as well, reluctantly releasing her hand. "Sleep well, both of you. We'll see what the morning brings." As Josephine followed Lizzie up the stairs, she glanced back to find Zachary watching them, his expression a mixture of tenderness and wonder that mirrored her own feelings perfectly. The morning brought clearing skies, but confirmed Zachary's prediction about the roads. A ranch hand who had ridden partway toward Cheyenne returned with news of washouts that would take at least a day to repair. Josephine penned a note to be delivered to the school board explaining her unavoidable absence, while Zachary arranged for additional supplies to be brought from the ranch's storehouses. The unexpected extension of her visit created a strange limbo, not quite a guest anymore, but not yet defined as something more. Zachary had ranch work that couldn't be postponed, and Lizzie had her lessons with Mrs. Winters, leaving Josephine to find her own occupation for much of the day. She chose to spend the time in the garden, drawn to the peaceful space that held so much of Catherine's spirit. With Lizzie's permission, she began clearing one of the untended beds, finding satisfaction in the physical labor and the gradual transformation of tangled weeds into ordered soil. It was there that Zachary found her in the late afternoon, her sleeves rolled up and dirt smudging her cheeks. He stood watching her for a moment before she noticed his presence. "You've been busy," he observed, surveying her progress. Josephine pushed a stray lock of hair from her face, likely adding another streak of soil to her already disheveled appearance. "I hope you don't mind, it seemed a way I could be useful." "Mind, it's—" He shook his head, his expression softening. "Catherine would have loved seeing you here." "Lizzie's done a remarkable job preserving her mother's vision," Josephine said, setting aside her trowel. "These journals are fascinating, not just gardening notes, but observations about life, sketches of plants, even poems." "That was Catherine," Zachary agreed, a fond smile touching his lips. "Always finding beauty in the details others might miss." He hesitated, then added, "You remind me of her that way." "I'm honored by the comparison," Josephine said sincerely. He moved closer, offering his hand to help her up from where she knelt beside the flower bed. "I've been thinking all day about our conversation last night." "As have I," she admitted, accepting his assistance and rising to stand before him. And I find my feelings unchanged in the daylight." She met his gaze steadily. "If anything, they're clearer." Relief washed over his features. "Good, because I've been planning our first official outing as a courting couple." "Have you now?" She couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. "I thought we might ride into Cheyenne this weekend once the roads are passable and attend the theater performance. The troupe from Denver is presenting Romeo and Juliet, I believe." "That sounds wonderful, though perhaps a play with a happier ending might be more auspicious for a first outing," he laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "You make an excellent point. Perhaps we should stick to dinner at the hotel restaurant instead." "Either would be perfect, as long as we're together," she assured him, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks at her own boldness. His expression grew serious as he reached out to tuck a wayward strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Josephine Reid, I believe you may be the best thing that's happened to Silvercreek in a very long time." The week that followed established a pattern that would continue throughout the autumn months. Zachary rode into Cheyenne every weekend, sometimes with Lizzie and sometimes alone, to escort Josephine to various town events or simply to spend time in her company. Occasionally, when her teaching duties allowed, Josephine would make the journey to Silvercreek, where she found herself increasingly involved in ranch life. The townsfolk took notice, of course. Some, like Martha Simmons and many of Josephine's students' parents, observed the budding romance with approval. Others, particularly those aligned with Wallace Thornton's interests, were less enthusiastic. Thornton himself made his disapproval clear during school board meetings, questioning whether Miss Reid's distractions were affecting her teaching. "The man's impossible," Josephine complained to Zachary one crisp November afternoon as they walked along Cheyenne's Main Street. "He actually suggested that I should consider whether my personal associations were appropriate for someone in my position." Zachary's jaw tightened. "Thornton's issue isn't with you, it's with me and every other rancher who opposes his water rights legislation." "He seems determined to make it my issue as well," Josephine sighed. "I'm sorry," Zachary said, his expression troubled. "The last thing I want is to create problems for your career." "Don't you dare apologize," she replied firmly. "Wallace Thornton doesn't get to dictate who I spend my time with. Besides, my students' test scores have improved since I arrived, and the school attendance is at a record high. He has no grounds for complaint." Zachary's expression lightened. "Have I mentioned lately how remarkable you are?" "Not in the last hour," she teased, rewarded by his chuckle. They continued their walk, stopping occasionally to greet acquaintances or admire shop displays. The town was preparing for Thanksgiving, with storefront decorations reflecting the harvest season and merchants advertising special goods for the holiday. "Will you and Lizzie be joining the town celebration?" Josephine asked as they paused outside the mercantile. "Actually," Zachary began, an uncharacteristic hesitation in his voice, "I was hoping you might consider spending Thanksgiving at Silvercreek." Mrs. Winters always prepares a feast, and having you there would make it special for all of us." "I'd love to," Josephine replied without hesitation, her heart warming at the invitation. "Especially since I have no family of my own to celebrate with." "Lizzie will be thrilled," Zachary said, his smile returning. "She's already planning to show you how much the garden has been improved since your last visit. I'm looking forward to seeing it, though I can't imagine much is still blooming in late November. You'd be surprised." Catherine always had something growing, even in the coldest months. Lizzie's determined to do the same. He offered Josephine his arm as they resumed walking. "Speaking of Lizzie, there's something I should tell you." "That sounds serious." "It is, in its way." His tone was light, but there was a depth to his eyes that caught her attention. "She asked me last night if you were going to be her new mother." Josephine's steps faltered. "She did. What did you tell her?" "That such things take time, but that I cared for you very much and hoped our relationship would continue to grow." He glanced sideways at her. "Was that the right answer?" "It was honest," Josephine replied carefully, "and honesty is always right with children." "But not the complete answer," Zachary pressed, bringing them to a stop in a quiet section of the street. "I should have told her that I've never met a woman I admired more, or one who fits so naturally into our lives. That every time you leave Silvercreek, it feels like the sun has gone behind the clouds, that I'm falling in love with you a little more each day." Josephine's breath caught at the raw emotion in his voice. "Zachary, too much, too soon?" he asked, his expression suddenly vulnerable. "No," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "Not too much at all, because I feel the same way." His smile was slow and beautiful, like dawn breaking over the prairie. "Then I'm the luckiest man in Wyoming Territory." They stood there for a long moment, heedless of the occasional passerby, until Josephine reluctantly stepped back. "We should probably continue our walk before we create even more gossip for Mr. Thornton to disapprove of." Zachary laughed, offering his arm once more. "Let him disapprove. Some things are worth a little scandal." Thanksgiving at Silvercreek exceeded Josephine's expectations. Mrs. Winters outdid herself with a magnificent feast that included not only the traditional turkey but also venison, an abundance of vegetables from the root cellar, and pies that would have been the envy of any Eastern bakery. Lizzie was indeed delighted by Josephine's presence, proudly showing off the garden where, despite the late season, several hardy plants continued to bloom in the shelter of the greenhouse. The girl had decorated the space with dried flowers and grasses arranged in artful displays that echoed her mother's aesthetic as recorded in the journals. "I'm saving seeds from everything," Lizzie explained as she showed Josephine her careful collections stored in labeled envelopes. "For spring planting. Ma's notes say which ones need to be started indoors during the winter months. You've created something truly special here," Josephine told her, impressed by the girl's dedication. Lizzie beamed at the praise. "I like to think Ma can see it somehow. That she knows we're keeping her garden alive." "I'm sure she does," Josephine said softly, touched by the child's sentiment. "Pa says so too." Lizzie hesitated, then added, "He says you understand about remembering people through the things they loved. Because I lost my parents too." Lizzie nodded. "Do you have something that helps you remember them, like I have Ma's garden?" Josephine thought for a moment. "My father loved books. He was a professor at a university in Philadelphia. I kept his favorite volume of Shakespeare, and my mother played the piano. I have some of her sheet music, though no piano to play it on anymore." "We have a piano," Lizzie said, excitement rising in her voice. "In the sitting room. Pa got it for Ma as an anniversary gift. She taught me a little before she died, but neither of us plays it much now." "I'd love to hear you play sometime," Josephine offered. "Maybe you could play for us," Lizzie suggested. "And teach me more. Pa would like that. He used to sit and listen to Ma for hours." The simple request, layered with meaning, brought tears to Josephine's eyes. "I would be honored, Lizzie." The remainder of the day unfolded in a warmth that had little to do with the fire crackling in the hearth, and everything to do with the sense of belonging that surrounded Josephine. After dinner, at Lizzie's insistence, she did indeed play the piano rusty at first, then with growing confidence as muscle memory returned. Zachary watched from his armchair, his expression a mixture of nostalgia and new joy as Lizzie sat beside Josephine on the bench, attempting to follow along with simple melodies. Later, when Lizzie had been sent to bed despite her protests, he joined Josephine on the piano bench. "Thank you," he said simply, "for giving that back to us, the music. It was my pleasure. Lizzie has a natural ear, like her mother." His hand found hers on the keys, entwining their fingers. "Catherine would have loved watching you two together." The statement, offered with such genuine warmth, touched Josephine deeply. Many men might have been reluctant to mention a deceased wife, especially to a woman they were courting, but Zachary spoke of Catherine with an honesty that honored both her memory and his current feelings. "I wish I could have known her," Josephine said sincerely. "In many ways you do through Lizzie, through this place we built together." He squeezed her hand gently. "And she would have known within 5 minutes of meeting you exactly what I see in you." "And what is that?" Josephine asked, her voice soft in the quiet room. "Strength, kindness, a heart big enough to love not just me but Lizzie and this life we lead here." His blue eyes held hers, unwavering. "I love you, Josephine Reid. I think I have since that first day when you faced down danger with more courage than most men I know." The words, simple and direct, washed over her like warm rain after drought. "I love you too, Zachary, more than I thought possible in such a short time." He leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that deepened quickly, containing all the emotion of his declaration and her response. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. "Stay," he whispered. "Not just tonight, but always. Marry me, Josephine, make Silvercreek your home." For a moment, surprise rendered her speechless, then joy rose within her, bright and certain. "Yes," she answered, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "Yes, I'll marry you." His smile was radiant as he kissed her again, sealing their promise in the gentle light of the fire. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Cheyenne, meeting with reactions that ranged from hearty congratulations to tight-lipped disapproval. Martha Simmons organized an impromptu celebration at the Mercantile, while Wallace Thornton called an emergency meeting of the school board to discuss the changing circumstances of our educational staff. "He's trying to force me to resign," Josephine told Zachary as they sat in her cottage the evening after the board meeting. "He claims that my impending domestic situation will inevitably interfere with my teaching duties." "What did the other board members say?" Zachary asked, his expression darkening. "Most seemed uncomfortable with his position, especially since I've made it clear I intend to fulfill my contract through the end of the school year." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "But Thornton has influence, and I worry he'll convince them over time." "You shouldn't have to choose between your career and our life together," Zachary said firmly. "No, I shouldn't," Josephine agreed. "But the reality is, a married woman teaching is unusual enough. Add in the distance between Silvercreek and Cheyenne, and it becomes practically impossible." "We could wait," Zachary offered, though the reluctance in his voice was evident. "Postpone the wedding until after the school year ends." Josephine shook her head. "No. I won't let Wallace Thornton dictate the timing of our happiness." She took his hand, her expression resolute. "We'll marry as planned in January. I'll continue teaching as long as the board allows. And when the time comes to leave, I'll do so with my head held high, knowing I've done my best for my students." "Have I mentioned lately how remarkable you are?" Zachary asked, his eyes warm with admiration. "You might have," she smiled, "but I never tire of hearing it." Despite Thornton's opposition, the school board ultimately voted to retain Josephine through the remainder of the academic year, with the understanding that she would not return in the fall. It was a compromise that allowed her to fulfill her commitment to her students while giving the board time to secure a replacement. The engagement brought about other changes as well. Josephine began spending most weekends at Silvercreek, gradually moving her belongings from the cottage in Cheyenne to the ranch house that would soon be her home. Lizzie, thrilled by the impending addition to their family, hovered between excitement and occasional moments of uncertainty that Josephine recognized as natural for a child who had been the center of her father's world for so long. "Will you still love me when you have your own children?" The girl asked one snowy December afternoon as they decorated the house for Christmas. "Of course I will," Josephine assured her, setting aside the garland she'd been arranging to give Lizzie her full attention. "Love doesn't divide, Lizzie, it multiplies. Each new person we love doesn't take away from the love we have for others, it adds to the total." "That's what Pa said too," Lizzie admitted, "but I wanted to be sure. I'll always be sure of my love for you," Josephine promised. "You're going to be my daughter just as much as any children that might come along later." Lizzie considered this, her expression serious beyond her years. "I think I'd like a brother," she decided finally. "A little one that I could teach things to, but not for a while." "I want time with just us first," Josephine laughed, touched by the girl's honesty. "I think that sounds like a perfect plan." As Christmas approached, Wyoming Territory was blanketed in snow, transforming the landscape into a pristine wonderland that took Josephine's breath away. The holiday itself was celebrated with a quiet intimacy at Silvercreek, with gifts that reflected thought rather than extravagance. A new journal for Lizzie's garden notes from Josephine. A delicate silver locket containing a pressed flower from Lizzie to Josephine. And from Zachary to his bride-to-be, a small book of poetry that had been Catherine's favorite. "She would want you to have it," he said, as Josephine ran her fingers over the worn leather cover. "A connection between the woman who helped me build this place and the woman who will help me carry it forward. I'll treasure it," Josephine promised, deeply moved by the gesture. Their wedding was set for mid-January, a date chosen to avoid conflict with the school schedule and to give the worst of winter's storms a chance to pass. The ceremony would be small, held in the Cheyenne church with only close friends in attendance. As the day approached, Josephine found herself reflecting on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. A year ago, she had been a newly orphaned schoolteacher preparing to leave everything she knew for an uncertain future in Wyoming Territory. Now she stood on the threshold of a new life with a man she loved deeply and a child who had claimed a piece of her heart. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the sun glinting off fresh snow that had fallen overnight. Martha Simmons and Mrs. Winters had taken charge of the arrangements, transforming the simple church with evergreen boughs and ribbons. Lizzie, radiant in a new blue dress that matched her father's eyes, served as Josephine's only attendant. As Josephine walked down the aisle toward Zachary, his face alight with love and pride, she felt a certainty settle in her heart. This was right. This was where she belonged. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows spoken with quiet conviction before the small gathering of friends who had become like family in this new land. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary's kiss held both tenderness and promise, sealing their commitment in the sight of all. The celebration afterward, held at the hotel restaurant, was a joyful affair that lasted well into the afternoon. Even Wallace Thornton made an appearance, offering stiff congratulations that suggested a grudging acceptance of the union, if not approval. As they prepared to depart for Silvercreek, now officially Josephine's home, Lizzie approached with a carefully wrapped package. "A wedding present," she explained, her expression a mixture of shyness and excitement. "From me." Inside the wrapping was a small wooden box, clearly crafted by inexperienced but careful hands. "Tom helped me make it," Lizzie admitted, referring to one of the ranch hands. "But the rest was all my idea." Opening the box, Josephine found it filled with seed packets, each labeled in Lizzie's neat handwriting with the name of a flower and a brief description. A small card nestled among them read, "For our garden, love, Lizzie." "It's perfect," Josephine said, blinking back tears as she embraced the girl. "We'll plant them together this spring." Lizzie nodded against her shoulder. "Ma would have wanted you to help me with her garden, I just know it." The winter months passed in a haze of newfound domestic happiness. Josephine continued her teaching duties, making the journey to and from Cheyenne as weather permitted, while settling into life at Silvercreek with increasing comfort. Zachary proved to be a considerate husband, attentive to her needs and patient as she adjusted to ranch routines. Lizzie thrived under the arrangement, blossoming in the presence of a maternal figure who encouraged her interests and respected her connection to her birth mother. Together, they spent evenings at the piano, afternoons planning the spring garden, and snowy mornings poring over lessons that supplemented Lizzie's education with Josephine's specialized knowledge. As winter gave way to spring, the seeds of Lizzie's wedding gift became the focus of their shared project. Using Catherine's journals as guides, they prepared beds, started delicate varieties indoors, and watched eagerly for the first green shoots to emerge from the warming soil. "Ma always said spring is when you can see hope with your own eyes," Lizzie commented one April afternoon as they worked side by side in the garden. "I think she was right. Your mother was a wise woman," Josephine agreed, carefully transplanting seedlings into a freshly prepared bed. "Do you think," Lizzie began, then hesitated. "What is it, sweetheart? Do you think she knows about you, about how happy you make Pa and me?" Josephine set down her trowel, giving the question the consideration it deserved. "I believe she does," she said finally. "I think the people we love are never really gone from us. They live on in our memories, in the values they taught us, in the beauty they brought into the world." Lizzie nodded, her expression solemn. "Like this garden, exactly like this garden." They worked in companionable silence for a while longer until Lizzie spoke again. "I'm glad Pa found you, or that you found us, I guess." "So am I," Josephine smiled. "More than I can say." By May, Josephine had completed her teaching contract and bid farewell to her students with a mixture of sadness and anticipation. The school board, true to their word, had secured a new teacher, a young man from Colorado who arrived with impressive credentials and nervous enthusiasm. "You've left big shoes to fill, Mrs. O'Malley," he told Josephine during the handover of classroom materials. "The students speak of you with such admiration." "They're wonderful children," she replied, "eager to learn and full of potential. You'll do well with them." Returning to Silvercreek full-time brought a sense of completion to Josephine's transition. No longer divided between two worlds, she threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, learning from Zachary, Mrs. Winters, and even the ranch hands who had initially viewed her with cautious curiosity, but now accepted her as an integral part of Silvercreek. Summer arrived in all its glory, bringing long days of sunshine, occasional dramatic thunderstorms, and the garden's full splendor. Under Lizzie and Josephine's care, Catherine's vision had been revitalized, with flowers of every hue creating a haven of color and fragrance that drew visitors from miles around. It was in this setting, on a perfect June evening, that Zachary found them working together among the roses. He stood watching for a moment, his expression one of quiet contentment before joining them. "The most beautiful sight in Wyoming Territory," he declared, bending to kiss Josephine's cheek. "My two favorite ladies surrounded by flowers." "We're almost finished," Josephine assured him. "Just deadheading these last few bushes." Lizzie held up a basket of spent blooms. "We're saving the petals for sachets. Mrs. Winters says they'll keep linens smelling nice all winter." "Practical as well as beautiful," Zachary nodded approvingly. "Your mother would be proud of your gardening skills, Lizzie." The girl beamed at the praise, then glanced at Josephine with a conspiratorial smile. "Should we tell him now?" Zachary's eyebrows rose. "Tell me what?" Josephine brushed the soil from her hands, her heart fluttering with anticipation. "We have some news that we thought might be best delivered here in Catherine's garden. We're going to have a baby," Lizzie burst out, unable to contain her excitement any longer. "In January, I'm going to be a big sister." The expression that crossed Zachary's face, surprise melting into joy so intense it seemed to illuminate him from within, was one Josephine knew she would remember all her life. "A baby," he whispered, looking to Josephine for confirmation. She nodded, her own smile matching his. "Doctor Martin confirmed it yesterday when I was in town. We're due around your birthday." In two strides, Zachary closed the distance between them, gathering Josephine into an embrace that lifted her feet from the ground. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." When he set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Thank you," he said softly, one hand coming to rest gently on her still flat stomach. For this gift, for everything you've brought into our lives. Our lives, Josephine corrected gently, because this is where I belong. With you and Lizzie making a family together. Lizzie, who had been watching with undisguised delight, stepped forward with a single perfect rose. I picked this for you, she told Josephine. It's the first from the bush we planted together. She glanced at her father, then back to Josephine. The cowboy's daughter planted flowers for her, saying, Mama would have liked you too. The simple statement, offered with such innocent certainty, brought tears to Josephine's eyes. She accepted the rose, drawing Lizzie into a one-armed embrace while Zachary enfolded them both. Your mother would be proud of the young woman you're becoming, Zachary told his daughter, his voice rough with emotion. And I know she would love Josephine just as we do. Not just as we do, Lizzie corrected with the directness of youth, but she would love her because we do. Because Josephine makes us happy. Wise beyond your years, Zachary smiled, dropping a kiss on the top of her head, as the sun began to set, casting long golden rays across Catherine's garden. The three of them, soon to be four, made their way back to the house. Behind them, the flowers turned their faces to catch the day's final light, a living testament to love's ability to endure, to transform, and to bloom again in unexpected seasons. January brought not only a new year but a new life to Silvercreek Ranch. On a night when snow fell in soft, silent layers outside, Josephine gave birth to a healthy son whom they named Daniel James O'Malley, Daniel for Josephine's father, James for Zachary's. Lizzie, who had appointed herself official assistant to Mrs. Winters during the birth, was the first family member to hold her new brother after his parents. He's so small, she marveled, her expression a mixture of awe and responsibility. But his hands are strong. Feel how he grips my finger. He'll need a big sister to show him everything, Zachary told her, his voice thick with emotion as he watched his children together. To teach him about horses and flowers and all the important things in life. I will, Lizzie promised solemnly, every day. As spring returned to Wyoming Territory, bringing with it the familiar cycle of renewal, the garden at Silvercreek bloomed once more under Lizzie and Josephine's care. New beds had been added to accommodate Lizzie's expanding botanical interests, and Zachary had built a sturdy bench in a sunny corner where Josephine often sat with baby Daniel, introducing him to the world his grandmother had loved. On a particularly fine May morning, as Daniel dozed in his basket nearby, Josephine and Lizzie worked together planting a new rose bush, a hardy variety that Catherine's journals had particularly recommended for its ability to withstand Wyoming's harsh winters. These will bloom all summer, Lizzie explained, carefully tamping soil around the plant's roots, and the flowers will be deep red, almost like velvet. Your mother had excellent taste, Josephine observed, handing Lizzie the watering can. She would have loved seeing all this, Lizzie said, gesturing to the flourishing garden around them. Especially the part you added. Josephine smiled, looking toward the new section they developed together over the past year, a children's garden with plants selected for their interesting textures, bright colors, and ability to attract butterflies and hummingbirds. I think she sees it, Josephine said softly, in her own way. Through us, Lizzie agreed with the simple wisdom that continually surprised and touched Josephine. They worked in companionable silence until the sound of approaching footsteps announced Zachary's arrival. He came bearing a pitcher of lemonade and a smile that, even after more than a year of marriage, still made Josephine's heart skip. My three favorite people, exactly where I expected to find them, he declared, bending to check on his sleeping son before joining them among the flowers. We've almost finished planting the new roses, Lizzie informed him proudly. And look, the first columbines are blooming. Beautiful, Zachary agreed, though his gaze was fixed on Josephine rather than the flowers. Worth every moment of waiting. As they sat together on the garden bench, sharing lemonade and conversation in the gentle spring sunshine, Josephine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the fear and uncertainty of her arrival in Wyoming Territory to the profound sense of belonging she now felt, every step had led her home to Silvercreek, to Zachary, to Lizzie, to little Daniel. and to this garden that connected past, present, and future in a living tapestry of love. In the years that followed, the O'Malley family continued to flourish alongside Catherine's garden. Lizzie grew into a confident young woman with her mother's eye for beauty and her father's practical strength. Daniel learned to toddle among the flower beds, carefully supervised to prevent damage to tender plants. And 2 years after his birth, a daughter joined the family, Catherine Rose O'Malley, named for 2 women who had shaped Silvercreek in different but equally important ways. Through changing seasons and passing years, through joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges, the garden remained the heart of their home, a place where memories were honored, where new traditions took root, and where the love of 2 women, one present and one remembered, nurtured generations of O'Malleys. And on quiet evenings, when the setting sun painted the western sky in colors no artist could capture, Zachary would often find his wife among the flowers, sometimes alone, sometimes with one of their children, always with the same expression of peaceful contentment that mirrored his own heart. "Happy?" he would ask, though he knew the answer. And Josephine, the schoolteacher from Philadelphia who had found her true home under Wyoming's vast sky, would smile and say, completely,